Oi oi, it's your boy, Slacky J, coming at you on the first day of summer in the UK. It's just starting to get hot over here, which means the fans go off because I have to record. So I'm here just in shorts, sweating my balls off, ready to... I suppose that's fitting, actually, because we're about to talk about Derrick Lewis, and that's his whole thing. But sweating my ass off, ready to talk about UFC St Louis. Was it a good card? This is really confusing because I like to check the sort of mood of the internet, watching these fights the next day as I do. I like to check on the old Reddit discussion threads, the Sherdogs and so on, and a surprising number of people were saying that this card was a banger. And I watched it, and it wasn't. Had some redeeming moments, and had some stuff I enjoyed, but definitely didn't come away thinking this was a banger. I suppose, there's the live crowd, there's also like how much you care about Derrick Lewis doing his thing against an opponent who's just not competent at all. Maybe watching it in the middle of the night before you go to bed is more exciting than watching it the next day and be like, yep, wind through all this bollocks with people just talking between fights. Maybe it's the adverts in between that make it. But we'll start with a positive thing from combat sports. As I always like to do, I could do Rajadamnern World Series again because after winning a belt like 2 weeks ago, Kunsiklek just knocked out a guy with a head kick in a title fight. I think he's on like a 40-fight unbeaten streak. Dude is doing incredible things and fighting every weekend. But I'm not going to do that for my moment of the week. I'm instead going to shout out the entire Flow Grappling Who's Number One card, which I'll talk about at length later, but the one that I enjoyed most was Nicky Ryan getting a win over a big name for once. Nicky Ryan is Gordon Ryan. You will know Gordon Ryan. If you're listening to this podcast, if you know anything about grappling, you know who Gordon Ryan is. If you know nothing about grappling, you know that Gordon Ryan is the best grappler on the planet. His little brother was incredibly highly touted for a very long time. When he was like 14, 15, 16, he was on the way up and he was John Danaher's star pupil. And it was all, this guy's going to be even better than Gordon. And it just sort of fell off the rails, and there was a big dramatic split between the team, and Gordon and Nicky are no longer on the same team or even friends if you listen to drama online. But Nicky Ryan's had some injuries. He also lives like a bit of a waster, just teaches jiu-jitsu in the morning, has a hamburger, gets stoned, plays video games. So he's always been a bit like hit and miss. There's always been potential there, but never realised. He had a match against JT Torres, who is, I believe, 2-time gold medalist in ADCC. He was Mr. under 77 kilos. Unbelievably strong guard passer. Great takedowns. If you YouTube JT Torres takedown, you will probably get a highlight of his awesome little arm drag to inside trip, which was a Tedere takedown, and I believe they called it Safada, which is like naughty or cheeky. The cheeky boy takedown. But his little arm drag, and you trip on the inside and drop to your knees. And you basically, it's kind of like a double leg, but with a trip and an arm drag involved as well. JT Torres hits tons of them. But Nicky Ryan, since being a gangly kid, he's thickened up. He wore this giant T-shirt for like 2 years and just got fatter and fatter. And then he took the T-shirt off for ADCC trials and he was jacked. So thick Nicky was a thing for a while. But he's been working really hard on his wrestling. So they have some fun little wrestling stuff going on to start with. They end up in a scramble. JT Torres gets on the saddle, the honey hole, whatever you want to call it, the bad position where people get inside heel hooked. And not being a great leg lock guy, and Nicky Ryan being a leg lock guy, JT Torres opts to stand up and come up on the knee cut, which is his pass, which he dominates everyone with. I think he smashed Gary Tonin with one 2 ADCCs ago. And he's sort of caught between backstepping and knee cutting, and Nicky Ryan threads his bottom leg through and ends up in what they sometimes call the honey stick, or just, when someone's attacking the saddle, you can pummel your other leg through and start attacking one of their legs. We talked about this with the Mutual Ashi episode of Filthy Casual's Guide. I said, leg locks, more than any other attack in jiu-jitsu, or attacking position in jiu-jitsu, you are inches from a firefight. Guys only have to do a small movement to rip your foot free and start attacking one of your legs if you're on one of their legs. So Nicky Ryan gets on this straight ankle and gets the finish. It was really impressive. Shotgun grip, ankle lock. Big in the no-gi community nowadays, thanks to Matusz Szyszyński. But it's a great little match, and the finish is a clever little counter. Honestly, I've never even tried getting to. Sometimes they call it the Philly saddle, but the honey stick. I've never tried getting to that from the bottom. I've always let guys fall back on the leg and then try to pummel my foot in. So that was interesting. Learned something watching that. Go watch it. Have some fun. UFC from the weekend. Should we start with the Derrick Lewis fight because that was what they topped the bill with? Rodrigo Nascimento. I tried watching his fights before this card. Not an enjoyable fighter, not an enjoyable heavyweight. As a heavyweight, your job is pretty simple. Turn up and swang and bang and get knockouts or get knocked out. What you don't be doing is winning two split decisions and a unanimous decision in a row. Not good. Not a good look as a heavyweight. Also getting smoked in under a minute by Chris Daukaus. That'll tell you the caliber of heavyweight we're talking about here. But watching Rodrigo Nascimento's fights beforehand, he comes out swinging like he wants to hurt the guy. He just can't. He just doesn't have any power, doesn't hit people that... he doesn't hit people that clean, and when he does, it doesn't seem to hurt them that much. He was battering Dontel Mays, and Dontel Mays is nothing special. So yeah, it looked like he wasn't going to have a lot for Derrick Lewis on the feet. But you were like, well, maybe he'll get him on the ground. And he comes out in the first round, starts to wrestle with Derrick Lewis, and Derrick Lewis goes, no, I'm going to trip you, actually. I'm going to do my Derrick Lewis judo, which we've always... It's been a bit of a running joke on this podcast because I was watching one of his fights way back in the day against, might have been Potts. Yeah, Ruan Potts. And they were talking about his judo black belt. And this might have been the commentators reading the wrong card. This might have been me listening to, only half taking what they said. But they said, well, I thought they said Lewis is a black belt in judo. So that was 2015. And ever since then, I've been like, well, he does have that black belt in judo that he doesn't really use much, except for the occasional inside trip, like against Chris Daukaus. And, since finding out that he's not a judo black belt, that's been a bit of a running joke here. But he does have some interesting trips, and he tried them against Nascimento, and he actually took him down, and you were going, oh, that's not great for you, Nascimento, if that's where you're supposed to be strong. Second round, Nascimento did actually get on top. Or was it the first round? But yeah, he actually mounted Derrick Lewis, and Derrick Lewis did his thing, did the get-up thing. We talked about this with the Jailton Almeida fight. I think, especially with his mount escape, there's a sort of presumption that Derrick Lewis is just gigantic, and it's only working because... Well, and also, other heavyweights can't do it, so it's some sort of magic as well. But the hand under the armpit is a good position from the bottom anyway. If you watch Marcelo Garcia doing great things to get out from under side control, hand in the armpit, as soon as they try to move their arm over his head to attack him, he sits up, stiff arms into their armpit and scooches back and gets away. Bridging from the bottom of mount and pushing under the armpit, you can throw the guy half a mile off to your side. You got problems because you can't, if you haven't blocked his posts, you cannot guarantee turning him over. But a lot of people, when they're in mount, they lose sight of just how powerfully you can bridge and try and turn, and they won't post in time. And sometimes that means that he can get out on top. Sometimes that means he can get out with a stiff arm up to his knees, and they're sort of half on his back, but their hands are on the floor, and they're sort of trying to stop themselves falling over, and he stands up. But against someone good on top, like Jailton Almeida, he does it. He goes hand under the armpit, bridge, pushes him away, and Jailton Almeida puts his hands on the ground, posts, and lets Derrick Lewis roll underneath him so that he puts his hooks in, and he's on Derrick Lewis's back while Derrick Lewis is on all fours. But what Derrick Lewis does in the Jailton Almeida fight, and against good opponents like that, is he immediately goes, lets go of the armpit and grabs one of the hands that's posted on the floor. And then he rolls onto his back again. And it's really clever because you've gone from being mounted with the guy on top of you, dropping bombs on you, which is horrible, especially if you're a heavyweight, to all fours, which is a fairly athletic position to start trying to get up from, but you don't want to get flattened out on your front with them on your back. And then by grabbing the arm and rolling onto your back again, you've put them underneath you. So they're on your back, which is supposedly a better position for submitting people, but they're not going to hit you. I mean, we talk about this every single week. Guys jump on other guys' backs, and then the guy who has the opponent backpacking him turns to look at the ring light, so that they're both looking up at the ceiling, and suddenly, gravity isn't on the side of the guy who's in the dominant position, so he doesn't have any strikes. What I'm saying is that there's stuff to be learned from Derrick Lewis on the ground, and that's crazy to think about. But it's true. I said it during the Jailton Almeida fight, too. It's a really nice little switch off, though, because he does that big explosive bridge with the hand in the armpit, and he tries to get to his knees and stand up. And if he meets the resistance of a good post and the opponent riding him and taking his back, he grabs the wrist with two hands and rolls. And then he's turned I'm getting pounded into unconsciousness position into I'm going to hold onto your wrist as hard as I can, and you've got to try and get it free to choke me. Choking people in MMA gloves absolutely sucks. It's really crap to have to do. Unless you've, battered them first. So third round, Derrick Lewis starts swanging and banging, and he hits Rodrigo Nascimento with the right hand across the top. Rodrigo Nascimento is throwing his own punches and turning the back of his head towards Derrick Lewis's punches, which is never a good sign. I get that Derrick Lewis hits like a truck, but when you're turning away from punches, you're likely to make things worse for yourself. Because if you get bricked in the back of the head, that's a bit worse than getting bricked in the forehead. So Derrick Lewis gets his finish. He does his meme celebration. You've got to get him in because, he only wins 2 and then he has to fight someone good and then he loses. So gets the meme celebration in, moons the crowd. Everyone has a great time. Co-main event, hometown boy, Joaquin Buckley, who was campaigning to get the main event of this card, and they went, no. It's just harsh. But he took a fight with Ruziboev, who is a gigantic middleweight, or was a gigantic middleweight, because he's 6'5". And he'd come down to welterweight to fight Buckley. Buckley's fought up at middleweight. He used to fight up at middleweight, full-time. I said on the Boycast, I don't know about Joaquin Buckley in this fight because in a lot of Buckley's fights against taller opponents, he runs in on a straight line, throwing 5 or 6 strike combination, going up and down and ending with a wheel kick, and the opponent goes straight back, and he falls short on everything. And it's not like if you watch Imavov is not particularly good at circling off as a habit. He does it from time to time, and he looks smooth doing it, but it's not ingrained in his muscle memory. He's for every 1 circle out, he does 2 back straight up towards the fences. And Buckley against Imavov was hilarious because Buckley's just running on a line and Imavov's backing up and he's falling so short because Imavov's so much longer and rangier than him. And in this one, didn't matter because Imavov fights behind his jab and his push kick and uses his length, that long right hand into the weave, and then he steps in with knees and things. Ruziboev fought like an absolute clown in this one. He's throwing right hand leads, winging circular right hands, not even straight right hands, and he's leaning his head so far forward that Joaquin Buckley's hitting him with counter hooks. And you're going, how are you putting your head onto his hook when that's his shortest punch and you are choosing to lead? How do you go from the first punch you throw puts your head on the end of his left hook? Or right hook, whatever way around Buckley is. Insane. Now, Ruziboev was using weapons that, as a taller fighter, you don't have to just use the jab and the teep or whatever, or low kicks or side kicks to the knee or side kicks to the body when you're on the same stance, when you're on the opposite stance. Knees and uppercuts are good for taller fighters because the opponent's head is going to be coming in low. Stepping towards the opponent and throwing an uppercut at him as a lead is not good. And we saw that with the big Cuban bum in the heavyweight fight. What was his name? Rebecky Despain, the Taekwondo gold medalist, the Taekwondo Olympian. Stepping in, throwing an uppercut, and then the moment that the uppercut's past the opponent's head, they go, right, I'm having those hips, and they level change and take you down. So Ruziboev fought awfully. Joaquin Buckley fought quite cleverly for Buckley. He clearly wants to be, he wanted to be middleweight Tyson, and now he wants to be welterweight Tyson. It's all head movement, up and down, combinations of punches, trying to knock people out. But in this one, he used his takedowns. And I was going, oh my God, that crowd just cheered Joaquin Buckley scoring a double leg. They went mental for it. Did great work on top, was landing lots of elbows and things. Ruziboev was not doing very well on the bottom. He tried an octopus guard get up and just got smashed. He resorted to illegal up kicks at the end. Did almost armbar him from the guard in the second round, but that was because the clacker went for 10 seconds and Joaquin Buckley went right, hammer fist, hammer fist, hammer fist, as Ruziboev was holding his arm going, I'm going to armbar you. But he didn't, couldn't finish it in the 10 seconds before the end of the round, so it didn't matter in the end. So great performance by Buckley. Terrible call out of Conor McGregor. What year is this? Though it would be the funniest thing in the world if Conor McGregor didn't sign the Michael Chandler contract and instead said, I want to fight Buckley at 303. And Michael Chandler would have waited for 3 years, brown-nosing and kissing asses to try and get this fight. So what else was on the card? What did I enjoy? Carlos Olberg versus Menifield was a ridiculous fight. I said coming into this, this is a bit of a more dangerous opponent for Olberg, who's had a few softballs lately. He's catching up on the all-time light heavyweight knockout record, and they're giving him guys who are coming off a loss or a knockout loss or so. And then they gave him Menifield, and Menifield's actually looked pretty good lately. He looked pretty sensible, I'd say, against Dustin Jacoby. And then Menifield just, the moment Olberg drifts his hand out, because he always does like a long, lazy jab, and then he leans back with a left hook as the opponent comes back in. And it's worked incredibly well. If you watched, he's only got so much tape because he keeps knocking people out. But if you watch it, that's what he does in every fight. And Alonzo Menifield sees this lazy jab being put out in front of his face that isn't going to hit him. And it's like a rag to a bull. He just runs at him. And Olberg leans back for a left hook, misses it. Leans back for another left hook, misses it. Menifield crashes through into the fence, like Shamil Gaziev when he was attempting the takedown by charging like a bull the other weekend. And then he has to turn around and face Olberg, who's then teeing off on him. Just some of the dumbest stuff you'll ever see. I mean, completely normal for light heavyweight, but the dumbest stuff you'll ever see generally in MMA. So Olberg gets another great knockout on the record without, again, showing us how good he actually is. Crazy. Diego Ferreira versus Batuja Rebecky. This was my, going into this card, this was the one I was excited for. Ferreira is 99 years old. Ferreira is 39 years old now, which as a man who's not in his athletic ages anymore, always hurts when they're like, 35 years old, very long in the tooth. But Ferreira is old for that weight class. We're talking like we're getting towards Francisco Trinaldo sort of area. And I was saying last week on the Boycast, he's had this weird career where he does interesting things, he has interesting answers to takedown attempts, but he's always, I called him the shadow Charles Oliveira or the antimatter Charles Oliveira, where Oliveira gets taken down and does a ton of cool guard stuff to attack and threaten you and scrambles up while you're dealing with it. Diego Ferreira sees the takedown and goes, I can grab something cool on the way down, and then ends up stuck there. They're polar opposite approaches to having a cool guard. Also, his takedowns aren't that great, and he ran into Beneil Dariush, who has very good takedown defense. And on the Boycast, I went on a diatribe about how I'd been interested in the Dariush-Makachev matchup, but now no one will care because he's lost a fight or two. But also with Ferreira, I said I thought he'd probably missed it, and I think he still probably has missed it, as in his chance to be the guy, because he spent a lot of his career doing a weird thing where he lives in Pharr, Texas, Pharr, crazy name for a place, and he was driving 5, 6, 7 hours each way to go to Fortis MMA at the weekends to train with a top team, and it was just the daftest shit, and they talk about it every card, and you're going, either say you're taking your job seriously and move closer to the big gym with all the sparring partners, or focus on your gym and build it up and get sparring partners and have other fighters come in. It was one of those things where it was like a flex that I drive 7 hours to train every weekend, and you're like, well, 7 hours could have been used doing something else. If you told a good strength and conditioning coach that you did 7 hours in the car to go and train, they'd be like, well, you could have done some low-intensity cardio. You could have done this. You could have rested, which is the thing that all fighters need to be doing at some point. Really crazy that he's still doing that. I think he's still doing that because he had Alex Morono in his corner, who also trains at Fortis. And yeah, people were blown away by him in this fight, but I think this was a less impressive performance technically and skill-wise than even some of his losses, like the Gregor Gillespie one. But Rebecky was a very scary man. He's been going forward, smashing people with big overhand lefts, and taking them down, and then smashing them on the ground. And what happened in this fight was through the first round, he went forward doing that, and it didn't work. And he looked like, oh dear, I don't have any other, I have no other moves, what can I do? And Diego Ferreira did a great job of just staying tight, defending himself, poking out jabs when he could. So he'd jab when Rebecky was coming in, and then he'd jab him after he'd finished throwing his punches. One of the great things about Ferreira is that he's always been able to jab off both stances, which we talked about for a while. That was catching on. You had like Usman and Cyril Gane and Ferreira and a few others who were very good at going from both stances. Neil Magny, to a degree, even though he's not a great striker, going from both stances and just popping jabs constantly. And that wore on Rebecky. And he was also throwing high kicks as they came out of exchanges, which I really liked because Rebecky's 1 short and 2 tends to duck down. And particularly if you start putting a jab on a shorter guy, he's going to start leaning to try and avoid it, trying to slip it. And then if you keep throwing up the high kick, you either catch him in the head, which would be the ideal, but not going to happen probably, or he goes, I've got to stop leaning, and then he's standing there for you to jab. So you just have to keep it fresh in his mind. There was some really cool grappling when they hit the deck. Ferreira did a really cool thing from closed guard, full guard, whatever you want to call it. Rebecky was leaning in on him, so Rebecky's bum was off his feet. When you're kneeling in closed guard, if you posture up and sit back, your bum is on your feet, so the bottom guy doesn't have access to your feet. Once you lean forward on someone, and so if you're trying to keep them down or stay low on them and then come up with elbows, and pop up just to throw short elbows, you leave your legs exposed. So sometimes people use grapevines. Rob Whittaker against Yoel Romero is a great example of that. Uses grapevines which is putting your shoelaces under their shoelaces and pulling out. And then you create a space between their knee and body where you can put in your butterfly hooks and start getting up. Or you can start doing something that used to be called the TK guard, which is something Fedor used to do, ironically, even though he lost that fight to TK, which is when the opponent's weight is forward on you and his ass is off his heels, you put your feet, the soles of your feet, on his calves. It makes it difficult for him to jump up, to move well. It makes it difficult for him to sit back because he's just going to sit on your feet. And then you just pull him forward and his weight's too far forward and he'll probably come down again. So Ferreira put 1 foot on Rebecky's calf, and then he let Rebecky step over into half guard on the other. And then he hit a giggler, which is a little off balance. And it didn't work super well the first time, but then later he did it and he got up off it onto a front headlock. 2 gigglers in this fight by my count. And then when he got on top of Rebecky pushed him back to half guard. He freed his knee and pushed it over into almost a mount, like that 3/4 mount. And stepped over Rebecky's head into something Marcelo Garcia used to do all the time called the deep half guard killer. If you go watch my Filthy Casuals guide to Marcelo Garcia, he does it there against Pablo Popovich. Ryan Hall, who is brilliant at the deep half guard, said when he first rolled with Marcelo Garcia, because he went and trained there for quite a few years, he said when he first rolled with Marcelo Garcia, he said, okay, well, I'll pull him into my best game. I'll pull him into the deep half guard. And he said, well, I just couldn't because he did this. And it's a really cool position. It leads to, you can come out of it with like front headlocks, darces. You can take the back. Marcelo did it into a crucifix at one point on Pablo Popovich. It's super cool. If you're watching the fight again, it's the bit where he's got 1 foot trapped by Rebecky's legs and he steps over Rebecky's head with the other leg and sort of slides down. So yeah, he pounded on him and he got the stoppage and that was really good. I love Diego Ferreira. Always good to see him back in the win column. It's been a while. I think he was on 3 in a row or 2 in a row. What was it? Oh, no, sorry, he knocked out Michael Johnson, didn't he, in his last one? But he had a 3-loss streak from the Dariush fight. He was basically on the streak of his life from 2016 until 2020. And then he met Dariush in like a contender fight in 2021, lost. And then he met Gillespie, came in massively overweight. It seemed like he'd really badly prepared for that fight, gassed out. And then he fought Mateusz Gamrot and got stopped in that one too. So yeah, it was kind of like, oh, he's on his way out. And he knocked out Michael Johnson. But again, that's like old men of the division. So to beat a surging prospect like Rebecky, who had 1 loss on his record, and I think that was back in like 2018 or something. Jesus, it was 2014. So this guy's just been going and going and going. And Diego Ferreira stopped him by just staying there and being hard as nails and poking him back every time he came in. Anything else on this card? Caceres versus Woodson I watched, but I was not. I just... Something about the way Caceres fights just bores me. With the exception of when he knocked out Juicy J. But for the most part, yeah, it's just 1s and 2s. No power, no real threat of a finish. What was hilarious was Rebecky Despan versus Waldo Cortez Acosta. They took their guy with less than 10 minutes total fight time, and they put him in against another promising heavyweight, as promising as a heavyweight can be. And to be fair, they gave him a guy who's not really a grappler. But Cortez Acosta just waited, and Rebecky Despan, the Taekwondo Olympian, only ever throws punches, and they're only ever looping. Easy takedowns 3 times, rides out the first and second round, strikes with him in the third because Despan is gassed as hell. Even when Despan was given opportunities on the feet, he would just throw stupid things. It's like, you are 6'7", and you have this long background in Taekwondo, apparently. You should be putting bullet holes in people's stomachs with your front kicks. Long, straight front kicks. But he won't. He throws big round kicks to like the body and fails, and then he throws big uppercuts that miss. He would back Acosta onto the fence, and Acosta was just like standing on the fence and waving him on, and he would load up for an uppercut and rethink it, and it was just this it was like the Marge Simpson crumping frame where she loads up the uppercut. It was just so obvious. And Acosta basically got free money in his win purse, because Despan, when he hit the ground, he didn't have anything. Speaking of not having anything on the ground, Borshev. Man, I said beforehand this fight is going to be a hilarious disaster, because Borshev has a takedown defense rate of something like 30, as in 30% of takedowns he defends. Chase Hooper has a success rate on his takedowns of about 22. So really bad takedowns versus really bad takedown defense. Except Chase Hooper said, nah, I'm going to knock him down, bruh. And he did, immediately, with a big overhand left, chinned him. And it wasn't like Borshev was dropping his hands to deal with the takedown threat. He had his hand by his chin, he leaned back, and it just caught him on the end of the chin. And Chase Hooper got on top and beat the piss out of him for 1 round. And then he beat the piss out of him in the second round and got a Darce choke. The takeaway from this for a lot of people seems to be, damn, Chase Hooper's got hands. And I did like how confident he was looking on the feet. You've got to do that if you're a grappler. You've got to be able to strike confidently, even if you don't have like the finesse that the other guy does. Someone like Jim Miller versus Dwayne Ludwig, with the constant implication that you might grapple, your striking becomes more effective. But I think there was a degree of being quite fortunate that that punch landed so perfectly. Ones like that where you're just catching in front of someone's hand and you manage to turn their chin round, even though they've got their guard up and they're leaning back. Those are very... You can't plan those, obviously. I do think it's awesome that Chase Hooper's going after it with his hands on the feet and his kicks too. And his takedowns were good in the second round, but I think he got off to a really good start here and he made the best of it. I would be very interested in the rematch, but obviously he doesn't have to do that. He can move on with his career. Charles Johnson versus Jake Hadley was another one that I was looking forward to, and that turned out to be quite fun. Charles Johnson was paralysed in the first round by Jake Hadley covering his lead hand. Hadley was southpaw and Johnson was orthodox. And whenever Johnson jabbed, Hadley would pick his elbow up and do like the semi-shoulder roll, semi-kung fu wing block. Think Poirier versus Hooker, using that lead elbow, bringing it up and knocking the jab up. And that really gave him trouble in the early going. And then Charles Johnson started doing the switch cross, throwing his left hand as he stepped forward with his right foot. Or switched in place onto his right foot, so he went southpaw while throwing the left hand. And then he digged the right hand to the body from his southpaw stance. And from there, he started to open up and he actually found some confidence so that he could go back to orthodox and go, oh, actually, I am hitting if I throw in combination. And then he throws a jab and a right straight down the center. And Hadley picks his elbow up to parry the jab. And the right hand just sails underneath his elbow and hits him on the chin and knocks him down. Really gorgeous stuff. He had Hadley looking for takedowns. And Charles Johnson, if there's one thing about him, he's hit and miss on the feet. He gets taken down a lot, but he does get up. He gets up every single time. And Hadley was trying to hold him down by the end, and he just couldn't do anything. Goff versus Waters was fun, I thought. There was a really cool thing from Goff. I thought he was doing a good job as a shorter fighter on the feet to begin with, because he threw he got into range, and then he pressed in so that Waters stepped back, and as Waters was retreating away from Goff's hand range, Goff threw a low kick into the calf, and that's how you catch people. You can't be like Tai Tuivasa versus Volkov, where he comes out and he tries to run up into low kicks, because you're trying to run up to throw your longest weapon at their closest target, and they're going to see it coming a mile off. If you get close enough that you're going to punch them, when they back off, you kick the leg. And then he threw a nice front kick up the middle immediately afterwards while Trey Waters was trying to check the low kick. And then he threw he slipped a jab and he threw a right straight to the body. He threw that a couple of times. Really great weapon for closing the distance as a shorter fighter. You slip inside their jab, and at the same time you hit them with your right hand down the left side of their ribs. Or under the left armpit. That's really horrible too. Oh, and Esteban Ribovics. He fought Terence McKinney, who I called the lightweight Bob Sapp the other week. He's sort of got Bob Sapp's thing right. He comes out and he tries to knock the guy out in the first minute, and I don't think he gives up, but he becomes massively less effective after that. But he is getting bonuses, and he's not doing the Bob Sapp thing of getting paid a large amount to lose, which is what Bob Sapp did in his later career. Bob Sapp in his sort of like middle career, after he'd stopped being scary, he would come out and try for the first minute or so, and then when he realised he wasn't going to get his win money, he'd just go, well, I'm not going to get hurt doing this, and then he'd sort of give up. But McKinney, I'm not accusing him of giving up, he just isn't very effective after the first minute. But this one, he gets knocked out in the first minute. Ribovic had clearly spotted McKinney throws his right hand and then he ducks down to his left, because the very first exchange, they trade 1-2s, and Ribovic immediately picks up his right knee and throws it off to his right where McKinney's head is. Just misses him, does it again a few seconds later, and then does it again with a right high kick, and McKinney leans right into it. Bro absolutely saw that on the film, or picked up on it from the first exchange and said, I could keep doing that, which would be very impressive. And that's about it from that card. Just not great. All right. I mean, the big news was that Dana White said that they're going to not be doing the Apex anymore, which is great, but it comes in the same week that someone higher up, I think it's Mark Shapiro, he said that before this. And Dana White came out and said, as I'm always saying, I want to get out of the Apex. And it's like, no, you're not. You're always going on about how great the Apex is. But then the media is absolutely embarrassing at this stage. I think Ariel retweeted someone saying, like, it was some woman saying, could you get Donald Cerrone to brand me? Linking into my question about the professional bull riding league, or whatever that nonsense is that Dana's also doing, as well as Power Slap. Basically, everyone at these events now is a fucking hack. If you've been to any UFC events as press or as a photographer or just with VIP tickets, you know that the seats aren't actually that good. Sitting by the cage is kind of hard to see what's going on. A lot of guys who are big fans of this sport and have also been in those seats will say, like, if you want to go to enjoy it, try and find somewhere where you're sitting high enough that you can see over the top of the cage. Because it's shit looking through the cage, to be honest. But more than that, like, people who need access, this was the thing, it was like, if you go against the UFC, if you print anything negative about them, they won't give you access anymore. It's like, if you need access on the night to do your job, you don't have a talent. There are people who do interviews with fighters who don't need to be there on the night, and they get interesting interviews out of those fighters in their own time. And Dana White does not ban fighters from talking to certain journalists. The dudes who are there now are largely either shills like Kevin Iole. I was going to do a reading series of his latest piece about how John Jones has earned the right to not fight the interim champion. But yeah, Kevin Iole, who was fired by Yahoo Sports and then suddenly opened his own website where he covers an awful lot of Power Slap, but also has exclusive interviews with Dana White. And people like John Morgan who've been there forever and don't really question anything. But then this isn't a real sport. This is not like the NFL where people turn up and they go, hang on a minute, you were embroiled in this kind of scandal. Let's ask questions about that. This is the sport where people go, I'm going to be part of a viral Dana White answer. What did this dickhead say? Hold on. Media member asks Dana White to sign the Derrick Lewis cup he caught. I mean, just me, but I would throw myself under a train out of shame. But yes, someone higher up than Dana in Endeavour said that they will be leaving the Apex. WWE have also said this week because they're getting site fees from cities who pay them to go to the city with tax dollars. Incredible. Your money is not being used to fix the infrastructure in your shitty city. It's being used to bring the UFC to town, and you still have to pay $500 for tickets. Now, I'm glad to see him back on the road, but I think there's also some pressure coming from ESPN here because the deal is almost up. The renegotiations are going to start, and the state of the product, I mean, the lifespan of an MMA fan is quite short, so people don't remember. The quality of the product is quite different to how it was when ESPN originally signed this, week to week. And they already have PFL, and PFL are making a big push, even if it's not very successful. So, you know, we'll be seeing what's happening. There's rumours of Netflix, but I mean, at least I wouldn't have to pay for another fucking service. But that's it. It was an alright night of fights. Next week, we got Barboza versus Murphy, low-key banger of a main event. Adrian Yanez is back. Oh, the legend, Abus Magomedov is fighting Wally Alves. Or as someone described it the other day, Coughing Baby versus Coughing Baby. Clayton Rodriguez, he's back. He's good. And yeah, I mean, that's a real low-key one, that. But we got kickboxing on. We've got some boxing. Oh, I'll talk about Loma versus Kambosos on the Boycast. I'm also going to talk about Inoue, because he had an awesome fight where he got dropped in the was it the first round or the second round? Got dropped, and everyone went, oh my god, Inoue's been dropped. And then he went, right, now I'm angry, and just smashed the shit out of Neary. But we'll talk about that on the Boycast. And I suppose the rest of that Flow Grappling event that I was hyping up. And the ADCC trials. It's been a huge week for combat sports outside of the UFC. Honestly, it's a great time to be following combat sports. Generally, it's a naff time to be following the UFC only. But anyway, I'm your boy Jack Slack. If you want to get in on the extra stuff, sign up to Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. Upcoming Max Holloway stuff. Keep your eyes peeled. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Will it ever not be funny to have hot balls? Bless.